Hello and welcome back to our Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky 1 playthrough. In our last episode we went through the second day of competition at the martial arts tournament. We beat up the Ravens and they gave us a key at the end of the day to get into the Western Sewers, which we've done in a bonus episode, and it wasn't as long as I thought it would be. But yes, Estelle and Joshua are both now level 30, as we can see. And we have Niall on our case, well, trying to help our case at least, by getting us some background information. But for now, let us head back to the arena and continue the competition, because we still have to win in order to get our invite to see the Queen, potentially. 200 monies a night now. Oh. That is punitive. Wrong way. Going east. Lever says it's time for round 2, Zin. When you're ready, please proceed to the entrance gate. Well, we are as ready as we can be. Receptionist says, Master Zin, welcome to the Grand Arena. Please note that tournament participants are asked to remain within the arena's walls until the end of the day's matches. Have you made all the necessary preparations for a day of hot action? Let's go. The receptionist says, excellent, excellent. Your waiting room is the blue team room, just inside the hall on the right. Right well. Well, we shall try, shan't we? A girl's voice cries, oh, there you are. Estelle says, hi, Dorothy. Joshua says, short time no see. Seeing as how we only just saw each other in Zeiss. Dorothy grins, yeah, I know. I never dreamed we'd meet again in this life. I mean, since you got in so much trouble after you boarded that factory ship. Zin asks, so much trouble? Olivier says, well, this bears investigation. Estelle says, whoa. Dorothy, can we maybe save that conversation for later? Dorothy says, huh? Anyway, I was going to say, your friends here look kind of familiar. Olivier says, I seem to recall encountering you once in the city of Beausset. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance once more, my uniquely charming lady. Zin says, we passed by each other near the hot spring. Dorothy says, oh, I remember now. It's the drink and run guy and the bear in Eastern clothing. So Estelle, are you and Joshua fighting alongside these two in the competition? Estelle says, yep, that's right. Joshua says, we're on Zin's team, the bear in Eastern clothing, as you put it. So what about you? Are you covering the event for the newspaper? Dorothy says, well, until yesterday I was working on another story. Niall told me this morning that I should check out the martial arts competition to see you guys. You're as strong as he said you were. This is going to make for some great pictures. Estelle laughs. I hope so. Oh yeah, isn't Niall with you? Dorothy says, nah, I guess he had something important to check up on. I think he was up all last night wrestling with a bunch of papers or something. He told me today that he was going to talk to an old acquaintance. Estelle says, I see. Dorothy says, oh, and he wanted me to pass on a message to you. He wants you to come by the editorial department this evening. Whatever it is, he made it sound serious. Estelle says, okay. Joshua says, we'll go after today's matches. Olivier says, serious conversation. My old nemesis. Well, don't let me get you down. Meow. Estelle says, oh, would you stop? It doesn't even have anything to do with you. Olivier says, how very cruel, Estelle. And after our passions burned so strongly together just yesterday, am I merely refuse to be discarded when circumstance affords me no immediate use? Estelle shouts, would you please stop talking like that? Dorothy says, wow, Estelle, I had no idea. Isn't he a little old for you, though? Estelle fumes. He's talking about the tournament, but you're better off just ignoring everything he says either way. Dorothy says, I'm going to go ahead and find a good seat, so I can get the best shots. I'll be rooting for you guys. Good luck. And off she goes. Zin says, she's quite the unique sort of girl, isn't she? Estelle sighs. Between her and Olivier, I just get so drained. Olivier says, that just means we're relieving your stress before the match. Joshua says she is a pretty skilled photographer, at least. Most of the photographs that have been published by the World News lately were taken by her. Zin says, impressive. In that case, we'll have to make sure that our fight is one worth taking pictures of. Estelle says, yeah, no kidding. I don't know who we're facing, but we need to get psyched. Well, off we go. And into our room. Estelle says, ugh, they're late. The match is due to start soon, so where's the other team? Joshua says, it is kind of strange. Maybe something's holding them up, or... A man's voice says, come on, get a move on. An audacious voice says, we're moving, quit rushing us, alright? A young man's voice says, why did things have to turn out like this? A girl's voice says, come on bro, don't be getting all sad on us now. The girl's voice continues, we need to keep our spirits up in case we end up fighting them today. Estelle says, buh. Don says, you. Joshua says, so it was your team? Olivier chuckles. I should have known they wouldn't show up in a timely fashion. Kyle says, guess we won't be fighting you lot today after all. Josette says, looks like you got lucky this time. I'd been hoping we'd get matched up with you so we could give the she-man there a lesson. Estelle frowns. Oh, you did not. Guard 1 says, hey, no idle chatter. Guard 2 says, or did you forget that it's only by his gracious generosity that you're even in this competition? Dawn says, come now, soldier. You don't need to worry about this. Have we not been well behaved so far? Guard 1 says, and I just hope you decide to keep that up until you go back to jail. Don't even talk to them. You don't make any trouble, and we won't make trouble for you. Estelle says, I don't think there'll be a problem. They want to clobber us tomorrow, after all. Guard 2 says, I think you know this, but there's a full company of soldiers here on security detail. Don't even start imagining that you'll have a chance of escaping. Kyle says, we know already, we're not idiots. Josette says, you guys are a real eyesore, so why don't you just go already? Guard 1 says, you little... Guard 2 says, don't let this kid provoke you. Just don't try any funny business. And the guards go off. Estelle asks, hey, what's going on? How'd you guys wind up in the martial arts competition? Joshua asks, is it really because Dunan allowed it? Kyle says, yeah, seems that way. He supposedly called for us specifically to participate. The better we do, the lighter our sentence gets. Estelle glowers, you've got to be kidding me. Sin says, that's a little strange for a constitutional monarchy. Olivier laughs. It seems the Duke is a mischievous sort. Don says, well, you won't see us complaining. I'd rather work off my sentence than spend it in prison. But then, that's not the only reason. Estelle asks, what's that supposed to mean? Josette says, shut it. It ain't any of your business anyhow. It matters to us. Joshua says, so if you're not here to fight us, then are you here to take on the special ops soldiers? Josette asks, what? How? Don says, damn straight we are. They were supposed to be our allies and they screwed us over. They used us to help expand the intelligence division's influence, then tossed us aside. Kyle says, we're idiots, plain and simple. We got double-crossed. And that really sucks. Estelle says, yeah, I suppose so. Come to think of it, I even feel kind of bad for you guys. Josette says, listen, we don't want your damn pity. You owe us, and don't you forget it. Estelle says, huh? What do you mean by that? Kyle laughs. Don't you remember the last time we met? It'd be a bad thing if you know who found out that you snuck into Leiston Fortress, right? Estelle says, oh. Don says, we don't like those jerks too much either, so we didn't say anything about you. You ought to thank us. Estelle grumbles under her breath. Joshua says, indeed. Thank you for keeping it to yourselves. Olivier says, this certainly sounds interesting. I'd love to hear more. Estelle glowers. You hush, it was nothing. Zin says, whoops. I hate to interrupt, but I think we're starting shortly. Chairman's voice says, we must apologise to everyone for the long wait. We now open the second day of the martial arts competition. Let's start by announcing the fight card for the 5th match. South Side, Blue Team, from the Calvard Republic, captained by Martial Arts Master Zin. North Side, Red Team, from the Bracers Guild, Grantsel Branch, Kurt's team. Estelle says, here we go. We can actually be fighting against Kana's crew. Joshua says, this won't be easy. We need to make sure that we don't get in Zin's way. Zin says, no need to be so cautious. Your assistants will be just as good as any fully fledged bracers. All we need to do is focus on winning. Estelle nods. Right. Joshua says, we'll do our best. Olivier laughs. Let us be off to glory. Let's be off then. Kana says, "Hey guys, so you made it." Annalise says, "Hey you rookies." Estelle laughs, "Hi you two." Joshua says, "We gave as good as we got." Grant says, "Zin the immovable, I always wanted to go up against you at least once. What do you say we see if my sword can match up to your skill?" Zin laughs, "Fine by me, but just to warn you, I'm not big on pulling my punches." Kurt laughs, "I was hoping to fight in the final round. I guess we'll see who fate favours today." Olivier says, "On one hand you have an advanced group of veteran bracers, and on the other a talented group of novice bracers and one genius performing musician. I imagine even Aidos herself might have difficulty at guessing the outcome." The referee says, "We now begin the 5th match of the No Holds Barred tournament. Both teams go to your starting places. Take your positions. Begin!" Ow. Okay, I'm gonna get you on him. Well, that wasn't very nice at all, was it?
By my art, become hard as steel.
Ow. Hmm.
Let me show you the true essence of beauty. Take that! By my arts, fall again as windswept snow.
Really? How to be exceptionally annoying.
By my arts, become hard as steel. By my arts, be calming as ocean waves. By my arts, fall again as windswept snow.
Right, you're gone. You nasty little man.
Take that.
Everyone's just decided to miss all at once.
99 combatants.
Oh, look at that. Olivier's leveled up to level 31. The referee says KO. The winner is Zin's team. Kurt says, nicely done. Grant says, I never thought that Zin the Immovable was really that capable. Zin says, you guys were no slouches yourselves. I don't think I'd have won if not for the others backing me up. Estelle pants, did we win? Joshua says, yeah, not sure how though. Kana laughs, oh don't be so modest. You may have had Zin with you, but you each pulled your own weight. Annalise sighs, I knew fighting Sheriff students was going to be tough, but I had no idea the black-haired kid would be such a tough cookie. Olivier chuckles, and I was thinking that this girl was going to put me to sleep. Perhaps later we can discuss each other's strengths over a glass of wine. Estelle pouts, oh give it a rest. Don says, well, not bad at all back in the dressing room. Kyle says, no kidding, that was a pretty exciting match. Josette says, I suppose it wasn't too bad. Estelle laughs, why thank you. So what's the deal? Why are you guys congratulating us? Got a fever or something? Josette says, we're not congratulating you, you little punk. It's just that it would be annoying to lose so easily to the group that drove us up a wall. Estelle frowns. You've got a snappy comeback for everything, don't you? Joshua says, come on, Estelle. Thank you very much. I know a lot's happened between us, and still you cheered us on. We appreciate it. Josette says, what? I'm trying to tell you that we're not cheering you on. Estelle whispers, Chairman's voice says, next up is the 6th match. Southside Blue Team, the Sky Pirates, aka the Capua family, captained by Don Capua. Northside Red Team, from the Royal Army Intelligence Division, captained by 2nd Lieutenant Lawrence. Don says, alright, it's finally time. Kyle says, time to teach those sneaky assholes a lesson. Estelle says, maybe this is how it was destined to play out. Our fingers are crossed for you. Good luck. Joshua says, watch out for their commanding officer. Keep him pinned down and you'll have a fighting chance. Josette says, okay. Shut up. It's none of your business anyway. And out they go. Don says, yo, little Mr. Masked Avenger. I've been waiting for a chance to pay back what I owe you. Kyle laughs. Yeah, we really ought to thank the Duke for this chance. Second Lieutenant Lawrence laughs. Josette asks, what's so damn funny? Second Lieutenant Lawrence says, you're orphans from the Capua family, one of Erebonia's ruined noble families. You lost your territory to a corrupt merchant and only survived by taking to air piracy. I was just thinking about what a touching story that is. Don demands, what the hell? Kyle asks, how did you know about that? Second Lieutenant Lawrence says, did you forget that we're part of the intelligence division? You'd be better off abandoning your little quest for revenge and just serving your time quietly. It does seem that you're trying to go straight, at least. Josette says, you... what? Kyle says, you sure love to run your mouth, don't you? Don says, time for you to taste a few orbital-powered bullets. The referee says, we now begin the 6th match of the no-holds-barred tournament. Both teams go to your starting places. Take your positions. Begin! The referee says KO. The winner is Lawrence's team. Estelle says, oh man, they lost. Olivier says, they were doing pretty well at first. It all fell apart when that fellow in red started in on them though. Zin says, definitely not an opponent to be trifled with. I don't think he was even trying as hard as he could. I can't get a decent read on his real strength. Estelle says, please tell me you're joking. Joshua says, no, I think it's the truth. That last technique just didn't feel like it was even all that focused. He's still got plenty we haven't seen yet. Estelle says, that's just crazy. Don and the Capuas enter. Not happy. Very not happy. Estelle says, I'm sorry, you guys. Don says, don't try to cheer us up, please. We got slaughtered out there. Kyle says, damn it, if my support tactics weren't so worthless. Josette says, it wasn't your fault. I'm the one who wasted all that energy on attacks that didn't do anything. Estelle says, well, hey, sometimes it comes down to more than just who's stronger. We're gonna get him back for you when we fight him tomorrow. Don says, what? Kyle says, you make it sound so simple. Joshua says, I'm not fond of promising what I'm not sure I can deliver. Zin says, a battle has to be won in the mind before it can be won in the flesh. Olivier says, what a fine saying! 'Tis as if you and Estelle speak with the same mind, but you, sir, with a more golden tongue. Guard 1 says, looks like you're finally done. Guard 2 says, alright, no hanging about, back to the docks with you. Don says, you've got to be kidding. Kyle says, we just got done fighting, can't you give us a few minutes to rest? Guard 3 says, you know, for hardened criminals you sure act like spoiled brats. Guard 4 says, come on now, let's get moving. Don says, bah. Kyle says, I'm so worn out. And they get escorted away. Josette says, hey, bracer jerks. Estelle asks, what? Josette says, we aren't going to be here tomorrow, but you damn well better win. If you let those assholes beat you, then you're going to have hell to pay. Estelle says, of course we're going to win. Who do you think you're talking to here? Joshua says, we'll win. I swear it. Guard 3 asks, are you done? Guard 1 says, enough stalling. And off they go. We receive 40,000 Mira cash prize. Lucky us. Estelle says, phew, I don't know how we did it, but we did it. Tomorrow's the final match. Zin says, we're really going to have to keep our spirits up, because that's going to be one tough match. So I propose that we go to the bar and let it all hang out, so to speak. Olivier says, I like the way you think, good sir. I should like to join you. Estelle says, so this is adult logic. Joshua says, we've got some stuff we have to do, so not tonight for us, I think. Zin says, no problem, see you later then. We'll meet up with you tomorrow morning out front. Olivier says, good night, my sweethearts. And off they go. Estelle turns to Joshua and says, now, let's see. I'll bet Niall's waiting for us, so why don't we go to the LaBelle news service and see what he has to say? Joshua says, yeah. Hopefully he's managed to learn something useful about those intelligence division members. Well, off we go then. Special Oath Cream. House for sale. Easy conversion to restaurant. Okay. The Bell News Service. Sounds about right. Volts says, lots of my editors and writers always get sick near deadline. It's an unfortunate cocktail of stress, insomnia and poor diet, if you ask me. Or they're just plain hockey. The results are still the same either way. Soraya says, it seems like the Royal Army has been around constantly. My company's not to blame for their heightened alert, I hope. Estelle calls, hey, Niall. Joshua says, pardon us. Niall says, hey, you're here. Amazing. Dorothy actually got the message to you guys and didn't screw it up. Will miracles never cease? So, I hear you won your match today. Dorothy was in an absurdly cheerful mood when she got back from it. Estelle laughs. Cool. Joshua says, Niall, about what we discussed earlier. Niall says, straight to business, I see. Take a look, got some background on those big shots. Niall held out a black file folder. Estelle asks, is this from the Royal Army? Niall replies, yeah, nothing super secret, but I was able to get out some documents. Let's just say they're on loan from some of my army contacts, but keep that under your hat, okay? Joshua says, absolutely. Estelle says, well, let's go ahead and read it here. Joshua and Estelle opened the black folder. Colonel Richard. Colonel Alan Richard. Born 1168 in the Rouen region of Le Beau. Graduated head of his class from the military academy, later assigned to the mobile task force led by Cassius Bright. 1192, recognized for distinguished service under Cassius Bright in the 100 Days War. Appointed to staff of the Military Operations Office after Colonel Bright's retirement. 1201, suggested formation of Intelligence Division. Queen Alicia approves the request and appoints him as the first commander of the new branch. Estelle says, wow, pretty impressive. Well, he is the man in charge. Joshua says, he always seemed to be pretty sharp. Looks like Major Sid was right about him serving under Dad 10 years ago. Estelle says, so Dad really was a colonel. I wonder why he retired. I mean, he had respect and fame and all that. Captain Amalthea. Captain Canone Amalthea. Born 1175 in Nobel's capital city of Gransel. Her excellent grades at the Military Academy earned her a place on the staff of the Military Operations Office shortly after graduation. 1201. Reassigned to the newly formed Intelligence Division on Colonel Richard's recommendation. Later appointed as Colonel Richard's aide-de-camp, assisting directly with Military Operational Command. Estelle says, excellent grades again. Another intellectual big shot, looks like. Joshua says that appointment means that she's been working for Colonel Richard for a long time. No wonder she's so loyal to him. Second Lieutenant Lawrence. Second Lieutenant Lawrence Belgar. Age and nationality unknown. A member of Jester, who was invited by Colonel Richard to join the Intelligence Division. Previous activities unknown. Estelle says he's been in disguise all along. He's not even from Libelle. And what's up with his old job as a mercenary being one big blank spot? Joshua says, I don't know. Jaeger Corps are known as the best mercenaries in the business for good reason. Estelle asks, no kidding? So maybe the colonel was just looking for a really skilled fighter? Joshua says it's a possibility, and I think I've heard of this jester somewhere before. Close the folder. Estelle says, thanks for this, Niall. At least we know a little more about who we're dealing with. Niall says, as long as it's useful. I've learned a few juicy tidbits while I was digging around too. Joshua says, juicy tidbits. Niall says, for example, First Lieutenant Julia Schwartz of the Royal Guardsmen, currently wanted for questioning, was in the academy the same year as Captain Amalthea. Estelle says, really now? Joshua says, they never gave off the impression that they got along all that well. Niall replies, maybe because they were academy rivals. Canone's got the brains and Julia's got the combat skills. Pretty big difference there. Sorry. Joshua says, I see. I'd imagine so. Estelle says, looks like Julia's always been the super serious knightly type, huh? Niall says, next up, and this has nothing to do with the military, mind you, you kids know about Princess Claudia, right? Estelle says, Princess Claudia, sounds familiar. Joshua says, if memory serves, she was orphaned when the Crown Prince and his wife died. She's the granddaughter of Her Majesty Queen Alicia. Niall nods. Right, she's not well known, but she is the direct descendant of the Queen. From what I could dig up, she lives in the Royal Keep and pretty much stays there most of the time, and it seems someone's been looking for prospective marriage candidates for her. Estelle says, huh. It's not super unusual for rich families, but still, just gross. Joshua says, that's not the point. The issue here is, who is this someone? Niall laughs. Spot on, kid. Estelle says, it could be... Colonel Richard. Niall says, hey, not bad, kid. It is Colonel Richard who's been scouring foreign countries for a suitable candidate, looks like. Estelle says, I knew it. But isn't that kind of weird? Why would he even be involved in setting up an arranged marriage? Niall says, pretty interesting, ain't it? And now, there's something I want from you two. Estelle says, huh? Joshua says, you want us to win the tournament and get you some information at the dinner party, right? Is that about the long and short of it? Estelle fumes. Oh, okay. Well, you're not shy about asking for stuff, are you? Niall says, hey, I got you information. This is called give and take, sweetheart. Joshua says, true, and it's been helpful. Estelle says, oh, all right. We'll let you know if we find out anything. Niall says, that's what I like to hear. Though if all goes well today, I might not even need to rely on you two. And the telephone rings. Niall says, excuse me for a sec. Niall says, hello, Libelle News. Oh, it's you. I've been waiting for you to call in. What? Starting now? Okay, got it. I'll meet you there. Estelle asks, what's going on? Niall says, sorry to cut and run on you, but I've got to go meet someone. Joshua says, sounds like you're in for a late night. The sun's going down as it is. Niall says, hey, I'm a night owl anyways. I'm only up during the daytime while that crazy chick is being trained. But hey, no biggie. You kids can just kick back and relax while I'm out. Estelle says, gotcha. Good luck with your work. Niall says, you too. Don't screw up tomorrow's match. And off he goes. Estelle says, well then, what should we do now? Joshua says, I guess we should stop by the guild and then go back to the hotel. We ought to report in the info that Niall got for us. Estelle says, fine by me. Well, back to the guild we goes. We've reported the results for Sewer Monster West. We got 3,000 monies and 8 BP. And we stay at Junior Bracer 3rd class. Eldon says, congratulations on an assignment well done. If you finish any other posted tasks, please be sure to come back and let us know. Anyway, now to the matter at hand. Elnan says, Estelle, Joshua, I offer my congratulations on advancing to the championship bout. It is a shame to hear of Kurt's loss, but I hear it was a very good match. Estelle says, yeah, it was pretty intense. I wouldn't go patting us on the back just yet, though. We weren't better than Kurt, not by a silge. That probably means something to them. Anyway, Joshua says, true, we just got lucky. We had Zin, along with Olivier's guns and magic to cover for our mistakes. They're the only reason we made it as far as we have. Elnan says, you two are very humble, a rare quality these days. By the way, have you learned any more information? Joshua says, well... Joshua explained the details of Niall's findings to Elnan. Elnan says, so, 2nd Lieutenant Lawrence is part of a Jaeger Corps, or more specifically, the Jaeger Corps known as Jester. First, I've heard of that name, definitely. I'd best look it up. Joshua asks, do the Guild and Jaeger Corps ever work together? Elnan replies, not at all. If anything, we consider one another to be business rivals. We make it our business not to interfere in matters of state, you see, whereas the Jaegers largely revel in such matters. They're often employed in border disputes and have some quite opposing viewpoints with us regarding the safety of the common man. Estelle says they don't sound very nice, so I take it there's no chance of getting any information on this? Elnan says, I wouldn't say no chance. With a bit of cloak and dagger, I might be able to find the information you seek. It would take several days to gather the necessary intel, however, so you wouldn't have it before the championship. Is that all right? Estelle says, championship, schmampionship. This has nothing to do with the competition, so yeah, if you please. Joshua says, thank you, Elnan. Elnan says, also, regarding the Colonel's hunt for Princess Claudia's future husband, we've uncovered a few morsels of information which may have some connection. Estelle says, okay? Elnan says, a member of the Imperial Royal Family will be arriving in Gransel during the Queen's birthday celebration. We don't know their name, but we do know that this is the first time someone from the family has come to Liberl since the war 10 years ago, so this is fairly significant news. Joshua says, I see. You're right that it does seem connected with talk of Princess Claudia's marriage. Estelle says, I don't actually know a thing about the Imperial Royal Family. I mean, the only Imperial I've ever even met is Olivier. Elnan says, the princess has just celebrated her 16th birthday. It seems much too early for her to be married. I suspect there may be politics at work here. Estelle says, "Whoa, 16? Geez, we're only 16 ourselves." Joshua says, "It is the appropriate age for a young lady to make her debut in high society. But unless we've reverted to a much more repressed time, it is much, much too soon for marriage." Elnan says, "Indeed, as I said, I suspect there is a political motive to this push for wedlock, and finding that motive will no doubt prove to be a most valuable endeavour." Estelle says, "Gotcha. If we can earn that invite to the castle, we'll be able to investigate much more easily." Joshua says, "Then we need to secure a win in tomorrow's championship." Elnan says, "As dangerous as this may be, I've got something for you. Here. We have received Gransel's sewer key B." Estelle asks, "What the heck is this to?" Elnan says, "The sewers. We always keep a few on hand at the capital branch. Never know when they might come in handy. This one should open one of the access grates around near the Grand Arena. There are some pretty strong monsters living down there, so I figured it might make for a suitable training ground." Estelle says, "Bring it. We could totally use the warm-up." Joshua says, "Thank you, Elnan." Elnan says, "I'm just doing my job. Make sure you don't head down there without some backup, though. If it's just the two of you, you're toast." Estelle says, "No problem there. We'll head on down with Zin and Olivier after we meet up with them tomorrow." It's night time outside the guild. Estelle says, "Wow, it's late." Joshua says, "We should probably get back to the hotel." A man's voice calls, "Hey, you two." Oh, more guards, lovely. Estelle asks, "Oh, what's going on?" Soldier 1 says, "We're on patrol. Nighttime patrols have been increased as part of the counter-terrorism measures." Soldier 2 says, "So it's best to avoid going out after 9 o'clock, if at all possible. You two should go on home." Estelle asks, "Don't you think that's a little obnoxious? What if you need to go out after 9 o'clock? Soldier 2 says, "It's the higher-ups who make the decisions, miss." Soldier 1 says, "Sorry to cause any trouble, but everyone has to abide by the rules. By the way, where is it that you two live?" Joshua says, "We're staying at the hotel on the North Block. We'll be there for the duration of the martial arts competition." Soldier 2 says, Hold on a second. I could swear I've seen you two somewhere before." Soldier 1 says, "Hey, these kids are in the tournament." Soldier 2 says, "Now that you mention it." Estelle says, "Oh, were you guys in the audience?" Soldier 2 laughs. "Well, we were on security detail. That match today was pretty incredible." Soldier 1 asks, "Tomorrow's the championship, no? We'll escort you to the hotel so that you can rest up for your big fight." Estelle says, Joshua comes over and says, "Very well, we accept." And so we get marched back to the hotel. Estelle says, "Thanks for escorting us." Joshua says, "We appreciate it." Soldier 2 says, "You've got to be kidding. We're big fans of yours." Soldier 1 says, "We're all in the same army, but I don't know. Those special ops types just rub me the wrong way for some reason." Soldier 2 says, "No kidding. I just don't get what goes through their heads. Don't you think talking like this is a little disrespectful of Colonel Richard, though?" Soldier 1 says, "Well, that's why we're putting so much faith in your participation." Soldier 2 says, "Good luck with tomorrow's match." Estelle laughs. "Thank you." Joshua says, "We'll do everything we can." And the soldiers leave. Estelle says, "Phew, this is all kind of complicated, huh? I don't think those guys know a thing about the Colonel's plot." Joshua says, "They seem to think the intelligence division are just regular soldiers. Whatever info comes down the chain of command, they accept as the truth." Estelle says, "Well, I'd hate to make enemies of them since they're rooting for us after all." Joshua says, "Regardless of anything else, it would be wisest not to stir up trouble with the rank-and-file soldiers. What do you say we stay in our room tonight and just rest up?" Estelle nods her head. "Okay." To the room. Estelle says, "Huh? Did you just hear something?" Joshua looks quite murderous. And he whispers to Estelle, "Be on alert when we go inside and be ready for a fight if things don't look right." Estelle whispers back, "Huh?" Joshua whispers, "I think we've got a trespasser. There might be explosives set, so be careful." Estelle whispers, "Wait, you're kidding, right?" Joshua whispers back, "I need you to do exactly as I tell you, no questions. If you'd rather stay out here, that's fine with me." Estelle whispers, "No way. I'm fine, let's go inside." Joshua whispers back, "All right." Estelle says, "Oh." Joshua says, "Looks like he got away. But that's strange. I don't get the sense that anyone's been in here. Nor does it feel like there are any traps set." Estelle asks, "You can seriously tell that kind of thing?" Joshua says, "I guess this is all that was left behind." Estelle asks, "What? A letter?" Joshua broke the seal on the letter. And he reads the letter. "Tonight at the stroke of 10, come to the cathedral. Please tell no one of this." Estelle asks, "And that's it? And what cathedral? That huge church over in the Western Bloc? It's already almost 10 o'clock now." Joshua is deep in thought. Estelle says, Well, it sure sounds suspicious, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. What do you think? Should we go for it?" Joshua says, "Absolutely not." Estelle asks, "What was that for?" Joshua says, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell. Look, didn't those soldiers just say that they were going to reinforce tonight's patrols? You can bet they'll be keeping a close watch on the West Block too." Estelle gasps, "Oh, right. Still, I hate to just pretend we never got it." Joshua says, "I'll go by myself then." Estelle asks, "Huh?" Joshua says, "It's easier for one person to stay hidden than two. I shouldn't have any real trouble getting to the cathedral unnoticed." Estelle just gapes. Joshua says, "Listen, if all I'm doing is scoping out the situation, I can handle it on my own. I just need you to stay here." Estelle pouts, "Hey." Joshua asks, "Huh?" Estelle says, "I'm no less a bracer than you are. I can handle myself and I won't slow you down. Your silver tongue's not going to work on me this time." Joshua says, "Estelle, that's not what I meant." Estelle says, "I know it's not that you don't trust me. I can tell you're worried about me, or more that you're worried for me. What are you not telling me?" Joshua asks, "How can you tell that I'm keeping something from you?" Estelle says, "I'm closer to you than just about anyone, Joshua. There's nothing you can keep from me. Not for very long, anyway." Joshua ponders and says to himself, "I'm impressed." Estelle asks, "Huh?" Joshua says, "All right, if you want to come with me, I won't try to stop you. It's almost 10 now, though, so we have to hurry." Estelle says, "Oh, okay." Joshua says, "But I want you to promise me something. If anything goes wrong, you do exactly as I tell you. One wrong move could be fatal." Estelle says, "Okay, I promise. Let's get a move on then." Should we not just dive out the window? Apparently not. Estelle says, Oh, they're all on duty and on patrol. That's a surprise." Joshua whispers, "It looks like they're patrolling. If any of these soldiers spot us, we'll probably get led back to the hotel. We need to study their movements and take whatever chances we can to get past them undetected." Estelle says, "Okay." Soldier says, "Hey, who are you? Yes, we're caught." Soldier 1 says, "Damn troublemakers." Soldier 2 says, "You need to stay indoors while we're trying to keep an eye out for terrorist activity." And then they leave. Estelle says, "Oh man, back to square one. We'll just have to try it again." Joshua says, "That was educational though. Some of the soldiers seem to have stationary posts, while others patrol on a fixed route. First things first, we need to keep our distance from the soldiers. Easy enough, but it may require us to go well out of our way." Estelle says, "Got it. So in other words, we can't take the direct route to the west." Joshua says, "Now, as for the ones who are actively patrolling, they can't see nearly as well at night, so as long as we don't approach them from the front, we should be able to get by them. The main thing will be to learn their patrol routes and stay out of their direct line of sight." Estelle says, "Okay, let's give this a shot then." Well, that was just a little bit closer than I would have hoped for. Ooh. Just slipped by. Joshua says, as for the patrolmen, they can't see well at night, so as long as we don't approach them from the front, we should be okay. The main thing will be to learn the patrol routes and stay out of the direct line of sight. Yeah. Well, we did eventually get to the West Block. And purple was the colour for the church, wasn't it? Estelle whispers, "All right, we made it." Joshua whispers back, "Stay focused, Estelle. I'll go in first. Stay close." Estelle whispers, "Okay." And so we enter the cathedral. Joshua says, "I'm sorry, Estelle. I guess I misunderstood." Estelle asks, "Huh?" A woman's voice laughs. "You came after all." Joshua says, "You?" Estelle asks, "Hey, aren't you the nun from before? The one who was attacked on the scenic route?" Sister Eleanor says, "Thank you for what you did back there. I assume you got my message." Estelle says, "That letter was yours. But why would you do something so secretive like just to say thanks?" Joshua says, "Now I get it. It was her all along." Estelle asks, "Huh?" Sister Ellen laughs. "You're very observant, Joshua. Pardon me then. Allow me to get more comfortable." Estelle cries, "What?" First Lieutenant Schwartz says, "Lieutenant Julius Schwartz, Commander of the Royal Guardsmen, at your service. It's been a long time, you two. I knew you'd come." Joshua says, "It's nice to see you again, Lieutenant. Last time was back in Rouen, right?" First Lieutenant Schwartz says, "Yes, it was. It hasn't been that long, but it feels like ages. Estelle frowns. Hey, hold on a second. Why are you in that get-up? And why'd you call us here? First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I'll answer your questions one at a time. First, the clothes. The Septian Church has long and deep ties with the royal family. Colonel Richard's little conspiracy had us on the run, and they've helped us stay hidden within the city. Estelle says, oh, okay. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, the answer to your other question, why I called you here, if you win the final match tomorrow, you'll get invited to that dinner party at the castle, right? What I need you to do is to get in touch with Her Majesty once you get inside. Estelle and Joshua are taken aback. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I realise that it's a selfish request, but since we're basically fugitives, there's no way for us to make contact. You're the only hope we have. Estelle says, well then, this is kind of unexpected. Joshua says, actually, we're participating in the competition specifically in hopes of seeing the Queen anyway. First Lieutenant Schwartz asks, what? Joshua explained the request that Professor Russell gave them during the Leicester Fortress incident. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, really now? Almighty Aidos, thank you for your gift most sacred. In that case, I have only one favour to ask of you. When you speak to Her Majesty, heed her counsel. Estelle says, of course, that was the plan from the get-go. Joshua says, that non-involvement rule still applies, even in a situation like this, but we'll do everything we can. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I'm grateful. Please take this with you. We have received Julia's letter. Estelle asks, what's this? First Lieutenant Schwartz says, give this to the head maid Hilda, and she'll know that you've spoken to me. Her Majesty is probably under very heavy guard by the Special Ops men, but you can trust Hilda. With her help, you may be able to speak with Her Majesty. Estelle says, she sounds like a heck of a lady. Joshua says, got it, we'll talk to her. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, thank you very much. Pathetic, isn't it? Estelle asks, hey? First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I was deceived, and thereby failed the one I was supposed to protect at all cost. And this happened not long after I swore that I would give my life to safeguard Her Majesty from harm. You can't imagine how helpless I feel having to depend entirely on another's help. Estelle says, you really shouldn't be so hard on yourself. I hate to say this, but there is the chance that we'll lose tomorrow's match. First Lieutenant Schwartz laughs. I'm certain that you'll do just fine. That Calvadian martial artist is extremely skilled, and you are both the children of Colonel Cassius Bright. Estelle asks, you mean you knew our dad too? First Lieutenant Schwartz says, it's not without reason that he was known as the finest swordsman in all the Royal Army, the Divine Blade at that. Before he retired from service, I had a chance to be trained by him when he was a martial artist instructor at the military academy. If not for him, I would not be nearly as skilled as I am. Estelle says, I can't believe that. Dad's never used anything except a bowstaff. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I guess he must have given up the sword when he decided to become a bracer. His goal wasn't to kill his enemies, he wanted to improve himself and help those weaker than he. That's why he chose the bowstaff as his weapon. Or so I imagine. Estelle asks, really? I didn't know that my use of a staff had that kind of significance. Joshua says, I'm sure he hoped that you'd inherit that same kind of mindset. I think he'd be proud of you. Estelle says, Joshua? First Lieutenant Schwartz says, Colonel Cassius trained both of you. I have all the faith in the world that you'll win tomorrow's match. Estelle laughs. Hearing you say that almost makes me think you're right. Joshua says, we'll put everything we have into it. Man's voice calls from the door. Pardon us, this is the Gransel City Guard. Due to the terrorist threat, we will now be patrolling the main facilities. I apologize for the lateness of the hour, but do you mind if we have a look inside? Estelle whispers, crap. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, quite all right, thank you. Just a moment, please, and I'll open the door. She then whispers to Estelle and Joshua, there's another door at the back of the altar room. You can get outside from there. Estelle whispers, okay. Joshua whispers, please be careful. Estelle says, whew, well, we managed to avoid the patrols so far. It doesn't look like there are any soldiers this way. Joshua says, yeah, I'm not sensing anyone. I guess the night patrols are finally done. Let's rest for a moment here, then head back to the hotel. Estelle says, okay. They sit down and Estelle says, so much is going on, it's starting to give me a headache. Joshua laughs. I'll bet. I never would have imagined it to be Lieutenant Schwartz waiting for us at the cathedral. Estelle says, wait, so she wasn't who you were expecting to find there? Could it be you were thinking it'd be someone you'd known before? Joshua says, well, and goes quiet. Estelle says, oh? Sorry, forget I said anything. Gotta remember the rules. Joshua says, Estelle? Estelle says, I won't ask you anything about before we met until you're ready to tell me. I try to be careful, but sometimes it just slips my mind. Joshua says, Estelle, I think you've gotten a little stronger during our travels. Estelle asks, huh? Joshua says, it's overwhelming to think about all the people around us, each and every one of them living his or her own life, all under this same sky. And every person you meet has a personality and a history and a story to tell. Every one of them is just like us, living day by day. Sometimes I just have to remind myself that no one acts without cause. Nothing happens without a reason or a motive, or an excuse. And it's only when I remember that I start to feel like I might be able to reclaim the parts of me I've lost. Estelle asks, Joshua? Joshua says, I'm probably just fooling myself, tricking myself into accepting things I can't change. But even so, I'm grateful for having someone with me. Sky, Dad, but most of all, you. Estelle says, Joshua? Joshua says, so, I promise, once this whole matter is settled, and if Dad comes back safely, I'll tell you everything there is to know about my past. Estelle asks, really? Joshua replies, really, with the stars as my witness. Estelle says, okay then, we have ourselves a deal. Then she jumps up out of the chair. Joshua asks Estelle. Estelle says, all my gloom's gone fluttering away, because once you've told me what you've got to tell me, then I'll tell you what I've got to tell you. Joshua says, what? Oh, wait, is this about that thing you've had on your mind? Estelle nods. Yep. I'm gonna have to psych myself up for it. Joshua asks, psych yourself up? Is it really something so dramatic? I mean, if it's that important, I really don't mind hearing about it now. Estelle blushes. Absolutely not. It's a delicate matter, and timing is crucial. Though I guess the situation does feel kinda right, but still, no dice, not yet. Joshua says, I don't get you sometimes, Estelle. I swear, you seem like you're ready to take on anything now. All because we've got a big talk planned. It makes no sense. Estelle frowns. Of course I'm ready. Ain't no way I'm letting those guys keep me from this talk. I'm going to show those special ops types how a touch of girl power can ruin their whole day. Joshua says, ruin their... and starts laughing. A lot. You really are your father's daughter. Estelle pouts. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? You'd better not be comparing me to a middle-aged man. Joshua grins. Yeah, I guess you're right. Somehow, I think we're going to do just fine tomorrow. Olivier says, yesterday was genuinely awful. We're back at the hotel. Reception. I returned to the embassy overfull of spirit when those tiresome guards saw fit to stop and cast flaming, stinking disparagements at me. Zin says they've tightened security at night, supposedly for anti-terrorist purposes. Were you two okay? Joshua says, yes, we went to bed rather early, so we didn't have any problems. Estelle says, and Elna lent us something that might really give us an edge. Estelle explained that Elna had loaned the spare key to the Gransel sewers. Zin says, now that should come in handy. He's a young one, but he's got a real spark to him. He always seems to know what you need and when you need it. Estelle asks, so what do you say we check out the sewers this morning? Joshua says the gate is just north of the arena. Olivier says, well, if it's for the banquet, we could muster up one more huzzah. Indeed we could. Okay. Probably be better served with the 2 shield coats. Right, well, there's our target. So, I'll call it off here, do another small bonus episode, and then we'll return for the final day of competition. So, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next episode.